Hello. And it's time to talk about all of the books which I read in April. Because, April's ending in a couple of days, and I am certainly not going to finish anything else in the next 2 days. Which means that we've got 6 books to talk about. Yes. And I think, I'm doing quite well this year. Every month I've read a lot of books for me, Okay, so how about we go... Oh, that won't work. Let's go by what the genre is of the books. Let's talk about them by genre. Because we can start with science fiction and that'll take care of half of them. I've just been in a science fiction mood lately. And also I went on a vacation and I wanted to make sure that I could bring a book with me that would fit in my suitcase. So let's talk about the thing I brought, Voyage to the City of the Dead by Alan Dean Foster. This is a little sci-fi book from the 80s, and it is one of the Humansk books by Foster. It's sort of a series, sort of a series, but really it's like books that are they're connected because they're set in the same universe. So in this universe, humans and the oh boy, what are they called? The aliens that look like big bugs. Oh boy. Well, I wish I remembered. I mean, come on. Nope, I'm spending too much time on this. This doesn't matter. Anyway, okay. They're part of this big Commonwealth, and they send people to other planets that are not part of the Commonwealth to learn about them. So anyway, in this book, they have an outpost on this planet that is called, well, they call it Horseye, but it's mostly called... I'm literally so bad with names, but okay. It's something like Samina. Anyway, it's basically the names of the 3 intelligent species on the planet, all stuck together. And yeah, so it's special because there's these 3 intelligent species, and the whole planet is was hit by some sort of massive asteroid, and it has this ocean, that fills most of the planet and is in this depression, and then this huge river valley that cracked, from this impact. And so it's ginormous river valley, truly absurdly large. And so naturally, the Commonwealth is interested in the people on this planet and the geography of the planet. So they send this couple to come to the planet to take an expedition up the river. And that's basically what the book is about. And the 3 alien cultures, there's kind of a mystery at the end of just what might be the source of the river. What nobody knows, because nobody's actually gone the whole way, because it's thousands of kilometers and the aliens haven't gone and explored it, so the humans are giving it a go. This was fun. The characters are this married couple who kind of don't really like each other that much. That was kind of irritating to read, but there was it's hard to have a cold, so some coughing. It's purposeful. It's sort of the point, part of the point, but it was interesting, to see this world. I would say it was pretty mid as far as a classic sci-fi book. You've got the aliens, you've got the planet, you've got the culture, and there's some stuff that's going on that's kind of interesting, but none of it's really that mind-blowing. I mean, once it got to the point where they were actually finding out the promised epic discovery, as it says in the little subtitle here, it began as a search for knowledge and ended with an epic discovery. That's not a subtitle. Whatever that is, that little description. I was like, okay, I'm ready. And it was an epic discovery in some ways, but I kind of didn't care that much. I was like, oh, okay. But you know what? Decent book. I actually bought it from Half Price Books a few years ago, solely based on the cover. So I will say that my favorite Alan Dean Foster remains Nor Crystal Tears, which actually does have one of those bug aliens on the cover. It's the best cover ever. But this is still nice. Like, you know, there's like planets or whatever in the background. There's like these people in weird golden bodysuits. I thought that these were the human characters, but I kind of further was forced to realize, no, actually I think these are just just like an example of some of the aliens maybe, because they basically do just look like humans, the ones that live on the river, so like at the lowest elevation, but they just don't have hair. I don't know. Okay, let's move on, because after reading that, I was like, oh boy, I'm in sci-fi mood, so I just picked up another sci-fi book I own, and that's Ringworld by Larry Niven. Which I've also had for a couple of years. So this is from 1970. And it's also about people, a couple of whom are human, exploring an alien world. So that's kind of funny, but essentially it's about some aliens have found this mysterious artifact in space. It is a ginormous ring that somebody has built around a sun. So if you know what a Dyson sphere is, it's kind of like that, except it's just a ring. It's not an entire sphere. And, you know, on the inner part of the ring is the planetary surface, where there's, you know, life of some sort, vegetation and whatnot. So there are these naturally cowardly aliens, though. So they don't want to explore it themselves. So they hire a couple of humans, a Kazin, who is a kind of alien that looks like a big cat, kind of, and then also one of their kind who is just insane, and they count basically any of their own alien kind puppeteers who would even interact with other species as a mad puppeteer. So anyway, those four are gonna go explore this artifact, and then that's what it's about. I was hoping for more, you know, rugged expedition kind of exploration. Like, that's the kind of thing I like. And honestly, both of these books don't have really that, because there's a high enough degree of technology for the explorers that they can get around without too many hardships. Makes sense, but it makes it less interesting to me. Also, this book. So this book won both the Hugo and the Nebula. I mean, I don't, whatever. Like, those awards, it's, you know, you're sometimes like, really? That was the best you could do that year? Okay, I mean, it's not a bad book, but really? So, this book I went back and forth, because on the one hand, there are moments in this book that are just really good. Just there'll be a few paragraphs that are just really well written, and I'm like, hell yeah, I love this. This is great. And then there's just this, you know, there's this unfortunate grating, like, sexism throughout this book, honestly, like, which, yeah, classic science fiction does have a lot of sexism, but I was just finding it more annoying in this book than I often do. It was like, okay, shut the fuck up, you know? Like, just, yeah. However, I did like it on balance, I guess. The main character is the human guy, Louis Wu, who is 200 years old, and he wants to see it all. He wants to continue traveling and seeing new things and experiencing new things. And I was like, I mostly liked him. You know, sometimes it was one of those classic sci-fis where it doesn't so much feel like, I don't know how to put this, where it seems almost so obvious that the sexism is kind of coming from the writing rather than the characters themselves. Like, you're like reading it and you're like, the character does not need to be this way, you're not, you know, but okay. Yeah, so it was interesting. There was some really wild technology in this, and just kind of a bonkers time. And I mean, really what happens is they get to, finally, like, once you get to the point where they get to the Ringworld, they then crash into it. And then they're like trying to figure out, how can we find civilization if there's anybody living on this thing? And then how can we get back off? It also ends kind of abruptly. And there were a couple of, so one of the characters in the group goes off with somebody who lives on the planet. And I was like, these two have a vibe where I feel like there must be books. He must have written books about, at least one book about those two actually continuing to explore the Ringworld. But I didn't look that up and find out, so who knows. I'm sorry, my cold and cough is making my throat really dry. So that's annoying. With all the talking, I mean. Okay, so, Ringworld. And then, here's a library book that I have not returned yet. A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. Because I want more sci-fi. And I was at the library looking for a couple of other books, and I thought, you know what, do they have any Becky Chambers? Because I've noticed before that they don't really, but they happen to have this. And I was like, hell yeah. The Monkey and Robot novellas are the only ones I haven't read by her. So, I read this. It was good. If you want something that has, like, you know, a plot, this isn't it, but but it's a charming world with, you know, it's kind of got that Becky Chambers, like, it's calming, it's nice, it's kind of cozy, and just has some nice kind of philosophical talk. And basically it's about a monk who goes around giving, like, serving tea and sympathy to people on this world, and then, you know, but they're not quite sure, like, that they're satisfied in life. And one day they decide to just leave the beaten path and just kind of go into the woods and see what they can see. And they happen to run into a robot. And the thing about the robots is nobody's seen them, no human has seen them in 200 years. Because one day they all, like, got consciousness and decided they didn't want to work in the factories anymore, and then they just left. And they've been, I don't know, hiding in the woods since then. And so this robot has decided that it is going to be sort of the ambassador to humanity, to find out about humanity and see, like, what they've been up to for the past 200 years. Yeah, so, it's nice. And there is a second one, which I assume will actually involve the robot and the monk going back into civilization, and so the robot actually encountering more people, because that didn't happen in this book, but that feels like that's what they're planning on doing next, so I will be reading that soon, probably. But it was really nice. Okay, now we have to talk about the other three books. Let's go to the nonfiction of it all. So one, Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. His name is Merlin. Anyway, it was an audiobook. And this one was about fungi. It was an audiobook, it was read by the author himself, and so that meant I got the joyous, you know, experience of listening to the guy say fungi about a million times. British people. Okay, so it's about fungi. Like, there's literally, what else could I say? It was really interesting. It was partially about how they work, but it was mostly about what we know about them, like, how they interact with other things. Like, there was a whole chapter on drugs, you know, and did you know that there's some companies that are figuring out how to use fungus to make building materials and make, like, biodegradable stuff that you can, like plastics, I guess, that you would like you can order a chair from these people and they send it to you kind of like IKEA in parts, and then you can put it together, but then, and, like, it's made from material that was made by fungi, but also so is the packaging, and I was like, what the fuck? So that's so cool. Very into it. Let's just keep going, you know. But yeah, so it was interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot. I don't know if I retained it, but I did learn it, and I would recommend if you want to learn about fungi. The other nonfiction I read, I actually physically read, although I don't have it anymore, a library book, was Conan Doyle for the Defense by Marguerite Fox. So this one, I've had my eye on since it came out in 2018, because Conan Doyle, like, you know, that catches the eye. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. But anyway, this is about a case that he was involved in for like a good 20 years. About this man who was accused and convicted and put in a prison in Scotland for murdering an old lady in Glasgow. Except he didn't even know she existed until they arrested him. He did not murder her. The way that they found him fell apart immediately, and yet they still pushed him through, you know, the jury process and everything, and he got convicted. And it was this like huge malpractice on the part of the cops, who full well knew that this guy didn't do it. Like, it was insane. And Conan Doyle heard about it, and I mean, mostly what he was doing was he was like writing letters, and like he wrote a little book about this whole case, like when it was still fresh. But the guy still, you know, he spent some amount of time trying to get him out of prison. Eventually, after 18 and a half years, he was able to. So it was interesting though. Like, it was about the case itself, of course, but it was also about the man, Oscar Slater, and the letters that he wrote back and forth with his family. That made me so mad too, because like, he was from Germany, and so he would write these letters, but he had to write them in English because the prison like wardens need to be able to read them. So he had to write the letters in English. Then they were sent to Germany, where his family had to find somebody to translate the books or the letters into German, because they didn't know English, so that they could actually understand what had been written. And then of course they would need to get their letters translated back into English to be sent to the prison. It was just like so frustrating. And like, so they couldn't write that many letters because of this, and also because of just like, at least at first, he wasn't allowed to write a lot of letters. And it was like, he was supposed to be, the people in this horrid Scottish prison were like breaking apart granite like they were basically like mining granite. Do you mine granite? Quarrying granite, I guess. And it was just like, what the, anyway. And he didn't even do it. Like, he didn't do anything. It was interesting. Also, just to learn about Conan Doyle and about the concept of like how late Victorian society was able to other a person like Oscar Slater so thoroughly, because he didn't fit into all these like conventional boxes, and was a foreigner and was Jewish, and like was not a gentleman, and like, you know, all this stuff. So I would recommend that. Just like, it just covers a whole lot of stuff. All right, and finally, book 6, a fantasy book, Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. I finally finished the trilogy, and Jade Legacy is fucking huge. It's like, you know, it's like 700 something pages. It is a beast of a book, and it takes place over the course of, I don't know, a number of years. I mean, by the time you get to the end of it, like, okay, it doesn't count from the beginning of the book though. She starts being like, oh, it's 12 years since blah, blah, blah. But the since blah, blah, blah is, I think, since Hilo became the pillar of No Peak. I'm going insane. Anyway, but a lot of time keeps passing. So the kids all grow up, and they're participating in the story, you know, thoroughly. And everything is bonkers. So a lot happens in this book. A lot of great stuff. I had a good time reading it, for sure. I mean, I feel like, as usual, I'm like looking at this whole trilogy like, this was good, but it wasn't the mind-blowing experience that some people seem to have had with it. I'm like, no, I mean, if I'm going to talk about like fantasy trilogies that are truly some of the best shit I've ever read, like, this is not on that list. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's a good book. It's just, you know, just good. Okay. So yeah, just this, yeah, there's a lot in this. And I enjoyed it. I really did. yeah, I'm glad that I read this trilogy and I had a good time with it. And you know, now I need to find another fantasy trilogy to read. I don't know. I'm on the lookout, but I enjoyed it and it was good, and I need to stop talking, so I'm gonna stop here. But yeah, 6 books, good reading month, excellent. Hope to continue that in May.